Welcome, everyone. I am really honored to be here leading this discussion on such a critical, important topic, water. So we're going to talk about both freshwater and seawater, which is why I've got this title, Salty and Fresh. And to kick it off, I actually want to hand it over to Carl first. Tell us about what new operational frameworks we need for managing water resources.
Carl Gantry, she said, Managing Director of Circle of Blue. And for about 20 years, we've been reporting on water issues around the world, reporting from a journalistic perspective and a data perspective. So oftentimes I'll say, well, you're salty and I'm fresh. So oftentimes saltwater and freshwater are lumped together in the oceans and the rivers, but they truly are connected. There are these liminal spaces where saltwater does meet freshwater. And of course, freshwater is the basis of our life. We can't live without it. We can't have our food, our energy. And so when we talk about frameworks, it's a framework for everything. We tend to silo ourselves. We tend to silo our issues. We talk about finance. We talk about systems change. We talk about counting the drops, fixing the leaks, but it's all connected. And so the one thing that we're seeing changing here at the forum and globally is thinking much more systemically. We're thinking about these liminal spaces where saltwater does meet freshwater, where investment does meet cultural and historical and immediate shifts. But before I hand off the microphone here, we face an existential moment right now. This is not what we need to do. This is what we either are doing or will be done to us right now. We have cities like Mexico City, Bangalore, and Dhaka in Bangladesh, Bogota, that are facing potentially this summer day zero scenarios when the taps could run dry. So we're sitting here in a very live situation.
Thanks, Carl. So I want to go to you next, Deborah, and talk about the oceans, so we can talk about that context and the work that you are doing there. But also tell us about SDG 14 and why it's so underfunded.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming out here today in this stunning environment. Carl, I echo what you're saying about the connection between fresh and salt water. Basically, it's a circle. And we talk about circular economies. The ultimate circle of life is when salt water flows to fresh water, back through the rivers, back into our ocean. It is one of the most beautiful circles. So I am here on the salty side of things. Our oceans, if the ocean was a country, it would rank 7th in the world in terms of GDP. And we're here at the World Economic Forum, and the oceans would be inside in the Congress Hall right now, representing most of the communities on the earth, most of a lot of the economics as well as the environment. SDG 14 is Sustainable Development Goal 14, Life Under the Water. It is the least funded of all of the SDGs, and yet 70% of our planet is water. 50% of the oxygen has come from the ocean, massive amounts of biodiversity, and billions of people per day depend on the ocean. One of the greatest challenges we face in terms of an existential threat is the fact that our oceans are in trouble. Sea level rise is a major factor. I work in emerging nations where we are seeing places that are losing beaches at the rate of 20, 30 feet a year. And when you get storms on a beach that's much narrower, the damage to communities, the damage to ecosystems is much greater. So part of my call to action really is that we need to focus on how we regenerate our ecosystems in ways that are not just for biodiversity, but for biodiversity, communities, and return on investment. And it's possible. It's what we're doing with Ocean Shot.
Thank you so much, Deborah. I realized that I totally skipped over my intro, but I wanted to make the connection because I was really privileged to be coming straight from Barbados here, working on a story about small island developing states. And not only do they have that connection to the ocean, but there's powerful leadership coming from those communities in terms of climate action broadly, but definitely as advocates for the ocean.
Absolutely, and we're seeing some great leadership from these emerging nations, small island developing states. And a lot of investors, a lot of the world see them as risky places to invest. But actually, given the crisis we're facing today, they're the ultimate unicorns. They're agile, they're fast, you can make a difference, you can scale it, you can translate it. It's a perfect opportunity for people.
Thank you for that. So moving over to you, Stuart, can you talk to us about the connection between water and energy and what sort of we need on the system side for these two to connect?
Is anybody in the audience good at math? I want someone to do the following calculation and have it completed by the time the panel's over. So you're going to multiply 2 million, which is the average amount of distilled water a data center uses a day. 2 million gallons. Then multiply that by 5,225 data centers in the US alone. Then multiply that by 365, and you're going to get a number that's in the quadrillions of gallons. Quadrillions. Just for the US, just for the data centers that exist today. Not the semiconductor plants, not the ones they're building in Atlanta and Phoenix and all over the place, just today. And you're going to see why we have a severe water crisis. And I'm predicting that the state of California will have a civil war between their agriculture and in Silicon Valley one day over water, because there's only a finite amount. And guess what? California has just banned large desalination plants. The state that needs it the most, that has a GDP equal to Great Britain, just banned the desalination plants because they were killing 70,000 marine life a day by sucking the water out of the ocean. We got a problem, guys. And it's not Houston we have a problem, it's planet Earth we have a problem. So everybody in the semiconductor tech world thinks that the whole thing is energy. That's why Bill Gates is investing in small nuclear plants so that we can have enough energy to run, the cloud in whatever tech company you want to think about. But they're all for missing the water part, all of them. And I have proof of that because I was on a panel at Kellogg at Northwestern Kellogg Business School. And all these big shot AI people were talking about how we're the next great thing and we're just going to solve for the energy. And I raised my hand. I said, do you know that you guys need 2 million gallons a day of distilled water, not sink water or tap water, distilled water a day? What are you going to do about that? It's like, I got a blank stare. So we got a problem. Sorry I'm taking up so much time, but I'm passionate about this, obviously.
Thanks, Stuart. So moving over to you, Mary, with that context, with that landscape, what is the business imperative for solving this challenge? But also, what is the language that will connect to action?
Thank you, and thank you so much for having us here. I just look back and think about water even with this view. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Cisco or a technology company, I always think we kind of securely connect everything to make anything happen. And I think we can do it. Now, we must do it in a way that's sustainable and inclusive as well. And so, as Stuart mentioned, right, technology requires electricity. It absolutely does. Technology, mindfully deployed, can be a source of really great impact. And so when I think about this, it's really how do you understand not only the intersectionality between some of these issues, whether it is thinking energy, water, biodiversity. If you're thinking about the intersectionality of sustainability and inclusion, sustainability and human rights, there's so much intersectionality that we've got to think through as we look for real solutions, real actions. But you also need to connect the dots and translate it into business value as well. So there is so many organizations that look at, for example, generative AIs, look at what it could do. I don't know about all of you, but I was born before the internet, and I do remember how work changed. And I think this is another seismic change. But so how do we do it in a responsible way that we're thinking about trust and privacy and transparency and sustainability? And so I think it's really through embedding sustainability into your corporate strategy. And I think about it from everything from our customers are demanding it. It is a customer requirement. Our top 50 hardware companies are ensuring that we have goals, that we're measuring it, that we're reporting it publicly. So I think it's a really thinking through how do you really translate it into a strategy, into an action, into all the kind of traditional business models that we need to do? I also think for us, it's how do we connect it to our circular economy strategy as well? Because to me, it starts with how I design our products. Are you designing it to be the most energy efficient, designing out waste, thinking through multiple life cycles? So it's partly, I think, our role is doing that translation between all of these different stakeholders, recognizing for an inclusive future, it needs to be sustainable. And how we do that is by really embedding it. The prior panel talked about the fact that how do we actually connect the dots to growth opportunity, to business resiliency, to differentiation.
Carl, I can see it.
Yeah,
I
that
was
was
going to
so-
hand it over to you anyway, but can
great.
you also
So-
respond? But talk also about the enabling environment for innovation.
Well, perfect question, because how do we create this enabling environment? Because we do have the good news here. Yes, there is some good news. We have most of the solutions now to maybe not solve all the crises, but at least start to manage our water far better. We also have forcing moments. I mean, I named only half a dozen of probably 1,000 that are happening every day now. So one, what do you do if you're flying an airplane or if you want to drive systems change? One is you identify what are your impediments? Who or what, where are the influencers? What is the data? How do we align that data? If you're flying an airplane, you look at your radar system and you look out the window, you have a compass and a map. So we need a new operating system for water. And what could that actually look like? Well, one, you understand the impediments. You realize that we have most of the solutions, but the entire puzzle is fragmented. We see ourselves in each little piece of the puzzle, not the whole puzzle. So one, identify what or who is holding us back. So there are really three things. One is the situational awareness. So that is align the data. Where's the infrastructure? What's the map look like? Who's doing what, where? The influence mapping, the finance mapping. And then two, I come from the journalism and storytelling world. You have to put this in a context and get beyond the data. There are heroes, victims, and villains in this story. It is a drama. And that drama, the villain doesn't have to be some evildoer in a basement. It could be status quo, right? So the third thing then, now we have the situational awareness. Who's doing what where? Bring new efficiency. We have the drama so that we and our leaders and our neighbors and our friends and our children can see themselves in the picture. That's me. And then the third piece of this is that co-convening and the actual engagement. So the co-convening, we have the Apollo 13 moment when we have to put our pieces on the table under pressure, Mexico City, Bogota. How do we put them together in the right order? So we're de-risking the finance so the billions of dollars that want to come in the water sector actually can step in. They're waiting, they're on the sidelines. And then the actual engagement piece. So get media. I hear that all the time. We'll get media. Well, I dare you to go find the media. We have to make the media, and we have to decide who we want to reach and what we want them to do. Then we create a flywheel of change, and then we can actually respond in near real time in a way that's inclusive. It looks back at our culture, our indigenous practices, and looks forward to using AI and using every drop that we're running AI on to actually design water's future. So that's what we're really working on, is designing water's future and a new operating system.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Stuart, you want to start and then.
Oh, I'm from the U.S., obviously, from Chicago, and one of the greatest failures that I see is we still don't have a national water policy. We let the states duke it out. Florida and Georgia have been suing each other for 15 years over a common body of water because Georgia needs the water to grow peanuts because they're the largest producer of peanut butter in the world, that state. So, and then you have the whole Colorado River fiasco where Arizona, California, San Diego gets 80% of its fresh water from the Colorado River. LA gets 60% from the Colorado River. Pardon my French, but it's a shit show out there in the U.S. And there are other countries who've had water policies for 30, 40 years. And I know it's a political hot button because if the states give the power to the federal government, then who are we? You know, we're the 50 states, or the 51st. When Trump gets Canada, is the 51st state. So it's that kind of stuff from the top down that Carl just mentioned it's a problem. And I don't know how to solve for it. All I know is I have a fund that's going to invest in water technologies that are going to save the southwestern United States.
So, Deborah, I
Thank
know
you.
you want to respond to that, but can you also talk about innovation that you're seeing as well and what you're doing on that front?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to first respond to what Carl was saying about, and I think it speaks to what you're talking about too, Stuart, which is this idea of convening, because I see tremendous opportunity, and I am a recovering academic. I work in the private sector, I work with governments, and I see across these sectors a way that people really want to come together. But it's how do we do that convening? Because I think you've hit the nail on the head. Right now, people come with positions, and they come with, well, this is mine, and obviously you want to take it. And that mindset is there. And we need to create the right convening where we say, no, tell us what is your issue, what is the problem, and what do we share. And what I usually find in these situations is people share so much in common, and they're looking at problems almost in the same way, and they didn't know it. So doing the proper kind of convening will really change how people approach these issues and moving forward. Your second question was innovation. I am a firm believer in innovation because I'm seeing it happen, and I think we should be supporting it more than we are, especially the young people creating this extraordinary innovation. I'll tell you the one that I'm doing with the man called John Paul DeJoria, who's extraordinary man out of Austin, was homeless, became a billionaire from zero. And we're investing in actually an innovation lab, because what we're looking at is how do we build reef structures for resilience that will protect the ocean habitat, create ocean habitat for species, because we're losing our reefs and our reef structures, and then using AI technology to help us to better understand those reefs. Because the issues are complex. How do we know where to put the reef? How do we know where the greatest need is? How do we monitor what we're doing? Technology and innovation is what's going to give us those answers. How many of you here like to go in the water, go in the ocean? Yay, everybody, right? We all love the ocean. And the ocean is extraordinary, it's beautiful, it brings us so much, but it is so difficult to study and understand, and it's expensive. And innovation and technology can help us translate that love we have for the ocean into action for the ocean. So, I think we're in an extraordinary time to see this happening.
Mary, I want to come back to you. Thinking about the innovation side, where's the opportunity for for-profit solutions within this ecosystem?
I think there's so much opportunity. With that said, I think there's so much demand for early stage. The criticality, as a chief sustainability officer, like I've got to think about my strategy that is 10, 15, 20 years long. And then I've got to try to imagine what's going to be available. What do we need to solve some of these challenges? And so one of the key things I think is helping pull together more capital, early stage, that venture. And what is fascinating, we've made some commitments around investing, not only through our foundation, so whether it's nature-based or technology, we've been doing more impact investing. And there's some amazing technologies there, especially thinking about IoT. Imagine, right, that if we can start connecting more and more things, whether it's connecting it to plants, and now we're getting more information, or the soil or the water, all of that information. I think about some of the amazing entrepreneurs that are really coming up with lower cost, more easily installed IoT devices that will give more early warning around flood. One of the other things that you see is connecting that information and then saying, how do we leverage indigenous practices? How do we do more precision irrigation? How are we really thinking through anticipating where we need to do the on-the-ground forest management to stop some of these incredible wildfires? What is interesting is there's kind of, a growing community that are sharing these kind of early stage. What's probably one of the things I'm most proud of is, although we made this commitment around the foundation, we've been working with our corporate development investment team. And generally, this team would invest in adjacent technologies to what we make, networking or security or collaboration, but they've actually changed their investment thesis. Because as I talked about our commitment to net zero across our value chain by 2040, and the criticality of greening the grid, thinking through water, biodiversity, they've now changed their thesis, and their latest investments, one Core Power, which is a a wave technology that would supplement some renewables. They've also invested in a D-cycle, which is a more environmentally friendly sustainability. So I think one of the opportunities is working with corporates to say, you know what, for you to be a viable business in the future, you've got to start embedding sustainability. And how do you translate that into more business value? But the critical part is more early stage investing. And not just that, then where can we find that first customer that will prove out? And sometimes we'll actually use some of our foundation dollars to do the evaluation so that we can prove that this intervention, this new technology, this new business model, the new solution is actually delivering on the business side as well as on the environmental.
That's super helpful. I wanted to give a little bit of context because one of the stakeholders that isn't exactly represented in this group, but you've mentioned it, is philanthropic dollars. And that actually is what I'm representing as the managing director of Global Philanthropy Forum. That is a critical part, whether it's early stage or whether it's convening, in making sure there's representation of all the stakeholders, making sure there's coordination around the systems change side of things, because it's not easy to get competing, to your point, Stuart, competing stakeholders at the table to see what is the viable solution. Like, there is an opportunity for it to be a win-win. There is an opportunity to find the path forward. Not only that, it's an imperative. We have to find it. It's not like, oh, it'll be nice to have. It's the only way. And so the role of those who bring people together is such a critical part. So I wanted, you want to answer that, and I'll answer the next question.
Yeah, I think that's a really strong point. I think philanthropy can be the catalyst. It can be the catalyst to get the ball rolling. It can be the initial de-risking catalyst. And then the ripple effect is when it moves out into the private sector, into the investment. Philanthropy alone will not solve the crisis we're in. If it did, we would have solved it already. But it does have a critical role, and I think we need to bring philanthropy in with the private sector and get them working together more strongly than they are. Right now, they're divided into silos.
Yeah, and especially divided into silos. That's a big problem. We need to connect the drops, pun always intended. So how do we create that compass and a map? Because right now we have a whole flotilla of solutions and organizations, whether it's our big institutional banks or whether they're the small innovators that have created a scalable technology but doesn't have the market. How do we create that compass and a map so we're all sailing together and not just protecting our treasure or our ideas? Because now, and that's hard, collaboration, SDG 17 is the hardest. How do we set that compass and the map? And one challenge to the philanthropy community is to not pick the winners. It's to set the course and to play the entire game, not to send money to a developing nation or to a particular community, but to really think and act systemically. How do you raise all boats?
So I just wanted to add a couple things to Carl and the rest of the panel. I read the UN study on water in 2023, and the macro statistics, unfortunately, are all about dollars or another currency. You need $6 trillion of public and private money to go into water to keep it where it is by 2030. Meaning, keep it where it is there's 2 billion people on the planet, 1 out of 4 that suffers water insecurity on a weekly basis. So you turn on your faucet on Tuesday, you got nothing. You turn on your faucet from 9 to 12 on Wednesday, you may have water. The problem is that by 2050, we need $40 trillion of public and private money around the world, making sure it's spread equally. You know, the equality of water is a big deal. And that's just to stay even. I don't think people understand the magnitude of $40 trillion. I've lived finance my whole life. I understand what that means. And it's like almost impossible, but not, if we coordinate together. And the UN and the World Bank are the two places where, and I'm not a political guy at all, I'm really apolitical. So the UN and the World Bank are the lightning rods to get this done. Because if you leave it up to the US or China or Saudi Arabia, for example, I don't think it's all about me. It's all about my perspective and what I need. So
The point that's embedded in that is if we solve the water crisis, which trillions of dollars at stake, if we solve the ocean issue, what we're solving is not simply water. We're solving a lot of the problems that we identify and that we have panels on all the time. Inequality, sustainability, indigenous communities, emerging nations. We have meetings, we have panels on them, but fundamentally we're united by something like water. And when we solve that problem, we will be able to solve, almost as a side effect, many of these issues. And I think we've got to bring that out when people are paying attention as to where do I put my money, where do I put my effort. Solving the larger questions that will have all these ripple effects will really make a huge difference.
Did you want to add, Mary?
I think, you know, as I listen to everyone, there's so much of a shared perspective on, I do think this is solvable. I think the question for me is how do we all really adopt but internalize this concept of the compass, right? Internalize that there are clear paths forward. How do we find those investors that are willing to invest so we start signaling that there is a market demand that will make it more an ROI that will increase and move to scale? I do think to me, one of the critical parts that I sometimes pull it all the way down. How do you connect the dots between some of these issues? And I sometimes really grapple with resiliency. At the end of the day, we all live, work, and create in communities. And must we have to, I think, create resilient communities. And you can think about resiliency at the individual level, at the community level, at the corporate level. You mentioned Bangalore. It's one of our largest offices. And with a recent drought, there was no water. And I'm like, okay, there's no water at home, there's no water at the office. What do you do as a business? And so how do we really think through building resiliency and anticipating and adapting to the new reality? But I think you need the strategy. You need common approaches. This is one area where there should not be a competition, but rather how do we more rapidly share what's working, but with the conditions that we've seen success? Are we investing not just in that new innovative startup, but we're also investing in the research? Great inventions in the lab, but will it work on the beaches in the Hamptons like we just invested with a company called Vesta, where it was a mineral ovoline that could absorb a gigaton of carbon, but what is it going to do to the ocean? So to me, I look at all of us and I go, the ideas are here. How do we then really work collaboratively?
For that. So in our last couple minutes here, I want to do a lightning round on, and you can respond to anything you want to inside that lightning round. But on, looking out at this audience and everyone that's gathered here, what's the one thing you want them to walk away with in terms of this narrative? And I would be really curious to also hear about there's a real risk, the narrative, like how do you talk about the potential risk, but also the potential opportunity and balance both of those narratives when thinking about this, because you need to be activated. And sometimes the the cliff can be really intimidating. So that's what you get in 30 seconds each.
Okay, first, thank you for coming. In my 30 seconds, what I'd like you all to get out of there is that we need everybody. We need all of you. We're all here together. This is what we should be doing more of. This community, sharing our opinions, sharing our views, and focusing on solutions. That, to me, is the most important. We can do this. We really can do this.
I'm kind of astounded, and my big thing right now is nano and microplastics in water. My intent is to never hold a plastic water bottle again in my life, let alone drink from it, because I studied the medical damage that nanoplastics in particular, which cannot be filtered out unless you have a $9,500 filter in your house like I do, that I got from Dallas, Texas. Otherwise, you're drinking nanoplastics, it gets into the placentas, and then it gets into a newborn before they even take their first breath. That's scary stuff. And Guess who's the largest consumer of plastic bottles in the world? The US. Guess who's second? China. Guess who's third, which was a sleeper for me? Indonesia. So they're consuming the plastic bottles of water, and you know where it ends up. You can't recycle them, even though people tell you can. So that's my big thing I did a deep dive, and on micro and nanoplastics medically, and I have, just so you know that I'm not asleep at the wheel, Carl is on the advisory board of my fund. He's the only nonprofit guy on my advisory board. I have a PhD from Stanford, I have a PhD from MIT, and I got serious business people, but I consider Carl the guy who's going to be part of the solution, because he can put the pieces together from the top down. So to say that I'm running a $150 million fund to invest in water, but my key guy is sitting next to me who's in the nonprofit perspective and the media perspective, I think that says a lot about how I'm trying to solve the problem.
Yeah, and I think one thing, thank you. And yes, we can do streaming puns all day on water. There you go. Anyway, so I think number one, see where you fit in the picture. See yourself in the picture. Understand, okay, we have these are systemic, existential challenges. Where do we fit? What's our little drop? But then, what is your superpower? Who do you know that you can educate? Who do you want to reach, and what do you want them to do? Because we have to remember, we have to scale fast. And we have to do that with humility. We have to do that with determination. And like I said, we have to do it with speed, because this is not tomorrow. It's not 2030. It's not 2050. The future is here, and it's here way ahead of schedule.
Maybe I'll just build on that. And how do you turn that into a story that's going to resonate with that individual, that turns into action? Because at the end of the day, we've invented lots of interesting conveniences, but to create that inclusive future that we all need, that resilient, that regenerative environment, it is going to require each of us to make a change. But I will tell you that envisioning that beautiful landscape, the ocean, it drives, it inspires, it's possible.
My imperative that I'll add is that all of you can talk about what we heard today with anyone you know. I think that's a really tangible thing you can take away. I want to thank all of our panelists for their incredible work for this collective future. All right. And with that,
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was salty and fresh. Thank you, Sarah, Carl, Dr. Deborah, Stuart, as well as Mary. Thank you so much.